All right, now, everybody. Quiet, listen to me. We're going to start a show. Now, some of you people have been with me before. You know it's going to be a tough grind, but we're going to have a show.
Welcome to the Mark Thompson Show. I'm Michael Schur. You have Mark Thompson coming back to this position on Thursday, but you're stuck with Michael Schur, and so too are Kim and Tony today. But we're going to have a good time. There's a lot of news, some of it local, some of it international. We will be touching on the 100 days. We're calling this the week of 100 days of the Trump administration. Erroneously, I said yesterday that it was the 100th day, but it was not. Today is the 100th day. So I'm calling it my excuse and my wiggle way out of that is to say that these are the week of the 100 days. So one thing that we have to cover is that Mark Carney won the election in Canada last night. He's the prime minister now, the fourth time, consecutive time that the Liberal Democrats have won in Canada. We're going to go in depth on what that means. Why would a Canadian election be so compelling? You're a smart audience, to us in the United States. Well, that Canadian election probably wouldn't have turned out this way had it not been for our president celebrating his 100th day today. So I spoke with a fantastic journalist, Andrew Cohen, last night, and we're going to air that in a little bit because it was a really interesting interview. And I think what's great is we don't pay a ton of attention. I shouldn't include all of you in that, but I don't pay a ton of attention to Canadian politics, and I'm a hockey fan. So, but this was interesting because I learned a lot about how Canada could take a really big position on the world stage. So that'll be coming up very shortly. We have David Cay Johnston, which is always great, and we'll have a lot to cover with David Cay. What better way, though, to mark, Kim, the 100th day of the Trump administration? What every president wants on their 100th day is an article of impeachment leveled against them in the House. And that is what Congressman Sri Thanedar did in the House of Representatives. He offered the first, and I would imagine not the last, articles of impeachment against President Trump. He's a Michigan congressman. He said that Trump is unfit to serve as president, represents a clear and present danger to our nation's constitution and democracy. Here is Congressman Sri Thanedar.
This is Congressman Sri Thanedar. Donald Trump has already done real damage to our democracy, but defying a unanimous 9-0 Supreme Court ruling, that has to be the final straw. It's time we impeach Donald J. Trump. The court said the wrongfully deported Kilmer Garcia must be allowed to return and receive due process. Trump ignored it. He ignored the Constitution. He ignored the very checks and balances that keep our democracy intact. This isn't an isolated incident. It's part of a dangerous, deliberate pattern. That's why today I introduced a resolution to impeach Donald J. Trump, outlining 7 articles of impeachment. Article 1.
We go through them. Article 1.
Yeah. Okay. We can listen to him. If you or we can listen to what article. Let's listen to them briefly.
Justice and abuse of executive power, from denying due process to unlawful deportations. Trump defied court orders. Article 2. Taking away Congress's power of the purse. Trump dismantled agencies and froze funds without permission from Congress. Article 3. Abuse of trade powers and international aggression. He imposed damaging tariffs and threatened military invasions of our allies. Article 4. Violation of First Amendment rights. He has retaliated against journalists, attorneys, and critics for exercising their right to free speech. Article 5, creation of an unlawful office establishing the so-called Department of Government Efficiency, DOGE, and giving Elon Musk unconstitutional power over our government and personal data. Article 6.
I think we can get out of this now because we've got a lot coming. But to give you an idea, of course, let's be realistic. This isn't going to go anywhere. It's a Republican House. It's a Republican Senate. Sri Tanadar doesn't have I would say, doesn't have the kind of profile nationally to carry this forward. Even Al Green did. He's not a constituency builder in the House yet. So it's a little bit different than some of the other articles of impeachment that have arisen. That said, this is not the conversation that any president has ever had on his 100th day in office. Sri Tanadar wrote an amazing book called The Blue Suitcase about, I think it was called The Trials and Tribulations of an Immigrant. He was born in India, lives in Michigan, and he was an entrepreneur there, and he got to Congress. It's an interesting story, but we point this out on the show just to say that this is the day that you take stock of your administration and where it is 100 days in, and impeachment is not where you want to start. So we'll talk more about that later in the show. We'll talk about it with David Cay Johnston a little bit, but I want to leave you now for a moment and play this interview with Andrew Cohen, who is a journalist and a professor and somebody who's followed Canadian politics for a very long time. We recorded this last night after the results were in. I really wanted to have a conversation about it because of its importance here in the United States, but also because it's a really interesting political story. It is a privilege to welcome to the show at a time when we're talking about Canada, the United States, an election north of the border and its implications and how it happened. I'm privileged to be joined by Andrew Cohen, author, journalist, professor. Andrew, this is certainly of course, even fans coming in, our Canadian fans applauding right now. Andrew, this is an election that one could not have predicted, let's say, even at the beginning of 2025. Is that not right?
Absolutely, Michael. This is what has happened in Canada in our history, Canada's history, 157 years, is unprecedented. 3 months ago, the Conservative Party, led by Pierre Poilievre, a young, dynamic, somewhat demagogic figure in Canada, was leading the polls by 20 and 25% when he faced Justin Trudeau, who had been or was then Prime Minister of Canada for the last 9.5 years. Justin Trudeau left in January, and Donald Trump arrived. And at the same time, the Liberal Party chose a new leader by the name of Mark Carney. Mark Carney became Prime Minister in March. Mark Carney, having won the Liberal Party leadership with 84% of the vote, that too unprecedented. And tonight, Michael, the election has not, we don't know every district in Canada. We call them ridings here. We don't know every district, but the networks have projected that the Liberals will be reelected for a fourth consecutive term. Michael, this rarely happens in Canada. And more than that, Mark Carney has not been elected to anything before. He's, in that sense, something he shares with Donald Trump. So Mark Carney, economist, financier, former governor of the Bank of England, former governor of the Bank of Canada, that's like our Federal Reserve, international economist, has just been now reelected or elected Prime Minister. The only question now is whether he gets a majority in the House of Commons, which will allow him to govern with a free hand, or a minority. Right now, they're moving toward a majority, but we won't know that for a little while longer.
Yeah, it's really extraordinary, and I'm not being glib about this. That his victory, he can thank one person for this victory. Wouldn't you agree?
Absolutely. Donald Trump will be toasted tonight throughout Liberal Party circles and otherwise, because without Donald Trump threatening to make Canada the 51st state, Donald Trump calling Justin Trudeau governor. He didn't do that to the Bank of Canada former governor, Mike Carney, which would have been okay because that was his former title. But even yesterday, or even today, the president mentioned once again the advantages of being of Canada electing him. That is Donald Trump. So we are in a situation we've never been before in Canada with an unelected prime minister. But the feeling is, Michael, here today, this is a meeting of the man in the moment. This is someone who entered politics in January, won the leadership of his party, or the nomination, so to speak, in March, has spent 37 days. Our campaigns are very fast in Canada, only 5 weeks, and who had never again been elected to anything before, never sat a day in the Parliament of Canada or a provincial legislature or dog catcher on a city council, none of that, and brings this extraordinary resume, projected confidence, authority to Canadians, and apparently tonight is on his way to a majority government with a big share of the popular vote.
Yeah, I don't know that there is an analog. Certainly, in all the years that I've covered politics, I cannot think of an analog to this, where something happened from outside of the boundaries of the country to elevate somebody who has never before been elected to anything. I don't know that exists in modern politics, and you've written extensively on politics both here in the United States, where you covered it, and in Canada. Can you think of anything that can compare to this?
No, I mean, in terms of a politician coming from nowhere, well, not nowhere, but ascending to the top job, this is like Donald Trump in 2016. Donald Trump had not been elected to anything either. I mean, that's where the comparison begins and ends. They are very different people. But I do think that they've had one conversation, and the president, after that conversation, was not as adversarial or antagonistic toward Canada in the way he had been under Justin Trudeau, whom people here believe the president did not respect very much. Although Justin Trudeau had won 3 elections. You know, in Canada, we have no term limits. You can keep running. And so were we to become the 51st state and Donald Trump were to run in Canada, he could be reelected here over and over again because we don't have term limits.
Don't tell him we don't have term limits down here, because he's already printing the caps. So
But Michael, something else that it is important tonight. Canada's elected a progressive government at a time in the world, in France, in Italy, in the United States, in Germany, where the right has risen. The right has not risen in Canada. This is a centrist, moderate country, 41 million people, just about the size of California in population. Not a small country, the second largest in the world, with its own way of doing things. And this is not a conservative government. The predictions had been, when the Conservatives were leading, that Canada would veer right, the way so many countries have. And tonight's result does not say that. And so many of us expect Mark Carney to assume a leadership role because of that in the G7, which is being hosted by Canada, by the way, here in June, and in other ways as well.
You know, that's a really interesting take that I also want to challenge a little bit, because what I hear in that is that were it not for Donald Trump, Canada would probably have gone to the right, whether it was Trudeau fatigue, whether it was actual issues that has the country, a moderate country, like you said, veering a little bit to the right, or, you know, it's a little bit of a taste that we got during those that trucker event a few years ago, where the truck convoys were there, and you saw a lot of right-wing Canada come out. So were it not for Donald Trump, actually, don't you think there's a chance that we would be having a very different conversation about the direction that Canada took, which makes this a little bit anomalous? No?
Yes, that's fair. Had Donald Trump not emerged, not arrived as he did in January, and Justin Trudeau left in January, things might be different. But as we know, in your country, elections, great swings of ideology can happen with very few votes. I mean, as we know in your country, the United States, the popular vote, Electoral College was different, but the popular vote was only 49 something to 48 something, and there was a point and a half that separated Kamala Harris and Donald Trump. Electoral College was different, and look at the direction your country has taken. Had it been Kamala Harris, it would have been a different direction. So you're right, though. Donald Trump, Mark Carney owes and it might be that Donald Trump wants to collect on this, but owes his political success to Donald Trump in the way that, and I do think that Donald Trump actually may like Mark Carney. It's not that Mark Carney is not going to challenge the president on some of this, some of the noise coming out of Washington, some of the trolling, we would call it. But I do think he'll respect Mark Carney because he's made his bones in international finance. He knows money. He knows the bond market and treasury bills and the markets. And he, as he says, I know how the world works. And that's why Canadians have embraced him in a way, as you say, Mark, unthinkable 3 or 4 months ago.
Yeah, and a little bit of this campaign too that has trickled over the border is about the fun that Mark Carney's having. He's skating with the Edmonton Oilers. He's against the boards with Mike Myers, who a celebrity here, an expat of Canada who makes his home here in the United States. How much of that has worked to his favor in terms of forgetting Donald Trump? How much of what he's done as a candidate since he's been elevated by all of this is Canada responding to?
Well, rare in election campaigns do people become more popular as the campaign goes on.
Yeah.
And if you look at the trajectory of Mark Carney, now it's true, Canadians barely knew him when the election was called. And that was one of the reasons the Liberals wanted to call. They wanted to be able to define Mark Carney. But the people like Mark Carney, he is considered smart, confident, authoritative, and yet has a level of humility about him, a level of charm. Those videos you talk about, or those situations, went viral. It's not just that. He was making matzo balls the other day for Passover in a kitchen with an apron. I don't think I'd want to taste them, but nonetheless, he showed an ability to make them, and this is all to humanize him. And but don't misunderstand. This guy is extraordinary. He happens to be my neighbor. This is a small society we live in, and I know him, so I have a bit of a bias. But this is someone with an international resume. This is somebody who arrived to do the job he thought needed to be done, and I don't think it is an exaggeration to say that given what Canada faces and the kind of negotiations we are going to have with your country and others, because foremost on his list is trying to diversify our trade, which goes overwhelmingly to the United States. And if the president is saying that he wants to keep imposing tariffs on us, well, we need to find different trading partners. Mark Carney is the person who can do that.
Yeah, one of the real traps of these tariffs that a lot of economists, and I'm not one, by the way, so I don't want to speak with any expertise on this, have said is that this is going to force a lot of our trading partners into better deals with other countries that they hadn't previously dealt with, and they're probably not going to run back to the United States once they have those deals in place, whether we have a change in administration or a change in posture. And Canada is always the sort of the number one country that people talk about when they refer to this sort of dynamic coming out of these tariffs.
Well, our challenge is a little bit harder than a European or an Asian nation. We send 79% of what we make. And the oil and gas we take from the ground and the minerals but also what we make, cars and other manufacturing, we send it to the United States. And Michael, it's been a lot easier for Canadian business in the life of our two countries to trade across the street, and it is across the street, than to trade across the ocean. So diversifying our economy is a very big challenge. A very big challenge. We don't have oil pipelines that go under the Atlantic Ocean or the Pacific Ocean to those markets. It has to go by tanker. It's light liquefied natural gas, but it will not be easy for us. One of the other things Mark Carney is trying to do, or says he'll try and do, is make for a more integrated internal economy. We are 10 provinces and 13 territories in Canada, all of which have different markets, and we don't trade well with each other. And we now realize that we are going to have to drop those barriers. And so that if you make a bottle of wine in British Columbia, which they say is as good as your wine in California, and want to sell it in Ontario, that you're not going to be tariffed, so to speak, internally by Ontario wanting to keep that out. That's going to change now, and that will help us as well. But this is a moment, Michael, for a country where people have loved the United States. Many of us have spent our lives in the United States. We are your best friend, whether you know it or not, we say here often.
Yeah.
And so it's an extraordinary position to be in, where we seem to be at odds with our American friends and looking for those markets so that we can make our way in the world and continue to be a prosperous, affluent place, which we are, like you.
Yeah.
And so, but we have, because we've traded with you, and now we're going to have to find ways of trading with other people. It will not be easy for us.
And not to mention, I think it's not just affected Canadians in the way and how they think about Americans, but it's certainly created a lot of love for Canada that would not have happened in the United States so spontaneously were it not for the positions that Trump was taking. I mean, the people are talking about how much they love Canada. They're buying and selling hats with the maple leaf on them, and it's probably in the long term a good thing for these sort of intra-nation relationships that could happen between the two countries. Let me ask you a couple of things before we let you go. But this conversation I could have all night, because it's so fascinating for a political nerd like I am, and I'll put that on you too, because I believe you are as well, to see an American president impact an election in a way that it turned it completely around, and the party that you would tend to believe he would not be in favor of would be winning. I want to ask a couple of things. First of all, when you talk about Mark Carney coming from virtual anonymity, he was named to be this interim prime minister. What was it about him and was it Trudeau who named him? But what was it about him that said, oh, this is the guy? Or is it, because here we have primary elections that go on forever and ever. So you do get a Jimmy Carter and you get a Barack Obama who catches fire out of nowhere, who had very little experience. But it seemed like they were trying to tilt the playing field a little bit here.
Well, he didn't come out of nowhere, in the sense that Mark Carney, as I say, had made his career in Canada. He had been the governor of the Bank of Canada. That is the equivalent, as I say, of the Federal Reserve. Before that, he'd worked for Goldman Sachs in New York, Toronto, Tokyo, and London in international finance.
Right.
Then he comes back to Canada. He does after being abroad, and he goes to the Bank of England. I've already said that. He came back to Canada to run a big asset company called Brookfield. In the last 5 years, Mark Carney has made it known that he was interested in being prime minister, not unlike Donald Trump making it known before 2016 that he wanted to be president. And
right.
So when Justin Trudeau resigned the leadership of the Liberal Party of Canada, the Liberal Party is one of the perhaps most successful political organizations in the world. It has been in power in Canada for something like 95 of the last 157 years. Right. And the reason it does that is the ability to pivot. It saw in Mark Carney somebody from the outside, somebody with international chops, in a sense, as an economist, and it declared it ran a very quick leadership convention, not unlike the nominating conventions of the Democratic and Republican parties, except, as you say, there were no primaries. There were other candidates. He won 84% of the vote. So the Liberal Party chose him as its leader. He became, on our system, prime minister. He didn't have a mandate. He went to the Governor General, that's our head of state, acting head of state, and said, I'd like you to dissolve Parliament. I'm calling an election. In Canada, you can call an election. He didn't waste any time. And so within 37 days, we move pretty quickly here in our system, and we're actually very happy we do. It isn't drawn out. Money doesn't play a big role in it. Outside third parties don't play, that is third intervening parties don't play much of a role. We worried about this.
There are no PACs.
No, there are no PACs. We're very simple people that way. There's a limit on what you can give. It's very little. It's $5,000 per person. So it's not a lot really. And it's deductible, of course. So, but Canadians saw in Mark Carney, and the Liberal Party saw in Mark Carney, the right man at the right time in the right place. And Donald Trump helped it become that. As we've said, it might have been entirely different. It might have been somebody else, and that person tonight would have lost in a landslide to Pierre Poilievre, who is very Trump-like in the sense that he talks about Canada being broken and he talked about he wanted to fire the head of the Bank of Canada. He aligned himself with anti-democratic forces in Canada. We had a big trucking,
Yeah,
3 years ago, and he was all in for that. So that's what Canadians rejected tonight. And you're right, it could have gone the other way. It easily could have gone the other way. And so this is an unprecedented victory, which will have international repercussions, because I think Mark Carney will emerge very quickly through the strength of character and his resume. He will emerge very quickly in the G7. And as it happens, I was just saying earlier, we are hosting that G7 meeting in Alberta in June. The president, I assume he's still going to come. He talks about having Vladimir Putin. I don't think that's going to happen. But I expect Mark Carney, who will be the least experienced person at the G7, I expect him very quickly to assume the authority of a leader. And I think that will happen.
It's believable. What now happens to Polyev? Where does his...
Well, that's a very interesting question. So he's leader of the opposition, and a very effective leader of the opposition. The trouble is, when you run for the leader of opposition, you usually get the job. And so tonight he essentially ran for that job and not prime ministry. We don't know. There was a big challenge in his district, his riding, as we call it. We don't know the result of that. If he loses that, he's gone. He will not have a seat in Parliament. The big question will be the size of the Liberal win. Will it be I believe it'll be a majority. Will it be a big majority, a small majority? And will his party turn on him, as we see everywhere, whether it's Democrats turning on themselves? There's nothing like losing to, as you know, as Democrats know, or Republicans, there's nothing like losing to lose confidence and to turn on each other. So his future is uncertain. Again, it will depend on the numbers.
Yeah. When you talk about the different ridings and districts and everything, we're so accustomed to red states and blue states here in the United States that, you won't really have a Democratic presidential candidate campaigning in the South anymore. Very rare to see that in Georgia, of course, but not in Alabama, Mississippi, Arkansas, Louisiana, those places. Is it that defined in Canada? I mean, I'm asking this because I don't know the answer to it. I'm very curious about it. I mean, do you know that, you're not going to win Alberta if you're X, and you're not going to win Quebec if you're Y? Is it as clearly
Michael,
defined?
you just answered your own question. Alberta tends to be heavily conservative. We're going to await results. We're going to await results to see if there was a Liberal breakthrough in Alberta. It was pushing 30% of the vote there, which might yield some seats for it. But they have 4 there now. They might get some more. Saskatchewan, the province next to it, also is not friendly to the Liberal Party. But they don't have a lot of people, those two places.
Right.
The Canada, 80% of Canada is urban, and much of that is in eastern and central Canada. Toronto, Montreal are the most, Ontario has about 15 million people. Quebec has about 7 million people or more. That's a lot of people. And British Columbia, though, is evenly split. That's our most westerly province, just north of state of Washington, Oregon. So there are places, but Quebec tends to favor the Liberal Party. Ontario tends to favor the Liberal Party, though Conservatives can do well there. They aren't tonight. Atlantic Canada, our 4 provinces in the east, were very strongly Liberal tonight. So we don't have red and blue states, but we do have places where you're going to do better than other places. And you called it right. Alberta is heavily conservative tonight. Quebec is heavily Liberal.
By the way, that was just a happy accident. I pulled 2 provinces out and went with them. So I'm
you're
glad
a political nerd.
glad I got lucky. Tell me, define for our audience here what is meant by elbows up.
Elbows up is the new mantra, the new rallying cry in Canada. Elbows up is a hockey term, and this is a hockey country. And elbows up simply means that you're not going to be pushed around. It's a defensive crouch, and it means don't mess with me. Don't mess with me, because we've been around. This country's been around since 1867 and far earlier. We fought wars with you, with the United States. We were with you in World War I, with you in World War II, with you in Korea, with you in the Gulf. We've been a good international citizen. We're small. We've made our way in the world in a very harsh and forbidding climate. We don't have California's climate in Canada or Florida's. you can't grow a lot of things in Canada. I mean, we grow wheat, but we don't have the great fertile plains that you do. So we've had to, against the threat of the United States, historically, not like today, but historically, the United States has made noises about absorbing Canada. Nothing like today. We've managed to survive, and Canadians are very proud of that. Where our democracy is over 150 years old, and it looks very much like it did in 1867. It didn't go through France went through 5 republicans, Germany went through 3 Reichs, and the United States has gone through several constitutional amendments. But we look pretty much the way we did before. And so Canadians are very proud. This will never be the 51st state. Donald Trump may or may not want to recognize that. And Canadians are angry in a way I've not seen them, angry, united, and anxious in a way I've not seen them in covering politics over 47 years. I've never seen this. And so tonight was a reflection of where Canadians are, and it was an embracing Mark Carney, the Liberal Party, very much a rejection of Donald Trump and the kind of things he's saying about Canada.
Yeah, you wrote a book. You've written several, but one of them was "While Canada Slept: How We Lost Our Place in the World." Tonight might have been the night where Canada finds its place in the world, unexpected.
And awoke.
Yeah.
Because one of the things we have to do, actually, and both the Conservatives and the Liberals promise this, is that we are not spending enough on national defense. And the president says this to us all the time. He's actually right in that. I mean, we are not carrying our weight in NATO. And we will do that. We are committed to that. But we've been something of a free rider in defense. We share continental defense with the United States. And that hasn't bothered presidents before President Trump, but it does him. So that's where we are. But Elbows Up is really a reflexive defensiveness leading to a certain belligerence among Canadians now in reaction to where we are. You said something about Americans wearing hats. You know, Canadians are the ones always accused of apologizing. And yet I have many friends in the United States where I spend part of my year on an island off the coast of Maine. They're the ones apologizing to me. I'm sorry, Andrew, for what we're saying about you. We like you, and you're a part of our community, as we have American friends here who are part of our community. And so the apologies are largely coming from Americans to Canadians rather than Canadians to Americans.
Right, and then hearing sorry is something that we're so used to. It's all right to say sorry to you guys. So yeah, that's fine. Andrew Cohen, you can go to andrewzcohen.com. You can sign up, I believe, for a newsletter there.
Yes.
Is that active? And
Thank you, Michael.
and yeah, of course. No, this has been enlightening. This has been fun, and it's exciting to talk about Canada and Canadian politics being relevant both here and abroad once again. So that's a really exciting thing to have happen. A privilege to talk with you, and we'll visit with you and see how things are going as Canada wakes up.
I would love that, and it's been an honor to appear. Thank you so much for calling.
Yeah.
The Mark Thompson Show.
So it was Pierre Poilievre who they were talking about, who lost the election. He also lost another election, as a few people I think in the chat have pointed out, or at least one person did. So he lost his election. It was a double whammy for him last night. I don't know, though, what becomes of him, but I really enjoyed talking to Andrew Cohen. I hope you enjoyed that conversation, too, because as I said, and as we know, we don't talk about Canadian politics a lot, right? And it's mattering now in a way that it may not. It matters for jobs. It matters because they're our neighbor. It matters because we're in trade agreements with them. So I was glad to have done that. I know what's that?
Since we're on the subject of Canada, and I know last night when we talked to Mr. Cohen, we didn't have the final result, and the victory speech hadn't been given. So it turns out that it's a lot of the United States mentioned quite a bit, featured pretty heavily in that victory speech. And I think we have it. Tony will play it for us.
Who's ready? Who's ready to stand up for Canada with me? As I've been warning for months, America wants our land, our resources, our water, our country. Never. But these are not idle threats. President Trump is trying to break us so that America can own us. That will never ever happen. We are once again at one of those hinge moments of history. Our old relationship with the United States, a relationship based on steadily increasing integration, is over. The system of open global trade, anchored by the United States, a system that Canada has relied on since the Second World War, a system that, while not perfect, has helped deliver prosperity for a country for decades, is over. These are tragedies, but it's also our new reality. We are over the shock of the American betrayal, but we should never forget the lessons.
But you're going to take us forward.
We have to look out for ourselves. And above all, we have to take care of each other.
So there you go.
Yeah, that's the winner, Mark Carney. Look, he's saying things about America. I think so. Somebody in the chat pointed out that it's not America, it's Trump. It's the American administration, and it's the person that the Prime Minister of Canada has to deal with. And it's Eileen Finn-Kopp saying, Carney's speech is breaking my heart. Donald, the gloomy Maine Coon, asked, I wonder if the loser will go down the rabbit hole of it was a rigged election. Pointedly, I want to respond to that because I was watching the CBC last night, watching the results come in, and a conservative person there said, nobody's going to challenge this election. Nobody's going to go, these results are legitimate. There's no question about it. We lost and we have work to do. So you don't hear that here. Mindy Lee saying nobody in their right mind would want to deal with Trump. Too weird. This is a chance for Canada to sort of come out and Trump made other countries come together against us. Good job. That's Rich saying that. And that's exactly what we're seeing. And that's why I wanted to spend a bit of time on this Canadian election, because it is an American story. It is a story about how our politics are affecting politics elsewhere and how we are not received. When you hear Donald Trump say, we've never before been respected like we are since when Trump is president, that's not true. Intellectually, that's not true. But now you're actually seeing it play out. Mindy Lee saying this is so embarrassing. So sorry about Trump, Canada. And he's destroyed our friendship, somebody points out, with Canada. How impossible is that to do, right? I mean, this is a relationship that has very little friction other than, there have been tariffs, there have been, trade agreements and things like that. There is competition. They grow a lot of wheat. We grow a lot of wheat. They drill a lot of oil. We drill a lot of oil. But the point is that we have always had a very amicable relationship. As a matter of fact, the bridge between Buffalo and Ontario is called, I believe, the Friendship Bridge. I mean, this is a very difficult to destroy relationship. And, for now, I wouldn't say it's destroyed because everything can be built back up in these things, but it's going to take a little while. And Canada is saying, hey, guess what? He's a problem. We're not going to deal with you until he's gone. Rich saying, in real time, Trump continues to geopolitically destabilize our country. America first is America alone. Right. And Rich is right there in that isolationism is part of, it's the sort of, let's say, the quiet part, or let's keep the loud part quiet, which is isolationism is part of America first. And I don't know that they're disappointed by this, but Trump likes being loved, and he knows that Canada doesn't love him. So we've covered the Canadian election. I'm glad we got to that conversation with Andrew Cohen, because I think when we look at what the effects of the second Trump administration are on his 100th day, he turns an election around by 25 points in another country, a place like he wouldn't, if Canada was a state, he wouldn't win the electoral votes there, right? So he's talking about making it a state. He's referring to Carney as a governor. No, that's not the case. On the day of his 100th day in office, articles of impeachment are introduced in the House, and Canada changes their entire election landscape because of Donald Trump and his posture. And it's
Can we talk about the articles of impeachment for a moment? Because while I realize they're not going anywhere because the wrong people are in power in Congress to push them forward, can we? Is this the third time articles of impeachment have been filed against Trump?
Well, no, I mean it's there have been many more than that. I know Al
Okay.
Green did, Steve Cohen did, Adam Schiff did. So there were several. It would be the third time if he were impeached. He's been actually impeached twice
Right.
by the House and acquitted twice by the Senate. So it wouldn't be the it would it's more than three times, but and a lot of that stuff
So
is
we're losing.
ceremonial.
He's been the articles of impeachment have been filed so many times we're losing count.
Right, that's exactly right. And
Okay.
I will say that I'm guessing now that articles of impeachment are going to be filed against every president from here on out. It's a flip
Probably.
thing. It used to be a sort of sacred and avoid at all cost type of thing. But anybody, even a backbench congressman like Sri Tanadar can come out with articles of impeachment and have them, read on the House floor and dealt with. But I think they're using it now as an attention getter, but it's important. Again, I mean, we're going to talk about JB Pritzke later in the show, and we're going to talk about the kinds of things that Democrats are saying and the postures they're taking, and so fighting back rhetorically when you can't do it with votes is what the Democrats have to do now.
Did you see yesterday this FA-18E Super Hornet, this military aircraft, slide right off the deck of an aircraft carrier into the ocean?
I mean, I did see that. I didn't see it, but I mean,
I laugh. It's not necessarily funny, but what happened?
Well, I mean, it's funny. It's funny in that we talk about our military. I mean, the symbolism you can't avoid. That's what's funny to me. It's terrible.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a $66 million. I think it's called the Super Hornet.
Yeah.
Went overboard, and it's at the bottom of the ocean now, or the bottom of the Red Sea, I guess.
It went right over the USS Harry Truman. Kerplunk. That was it.
It just rolled. Yeah, right. The plane stops here. No, it doesn't. Yes. So the symbolism is what is so incredible about it, and in greater detail, when it went overboard, I'm just trying to bring this up. All personnel are accounted for, with just one sailor aboard the Super Hornet jet sustaining a minor injury. So someone was on it when it did go over, and it's. But again, back to the symbolism. This is the kind of thing where you read it and you think, my God, this really happened.
Crazy. Yeah. I guess that's a picture of the type of aircraft we're dealing with. Yeah.
Yeah. I'm trying to get it loaded here. I can't get this loaded.
It's crazy. As you say, it cost $66 million and it just right over the side. Grateful that no one was more seriously injured on this one. They had to rescue 2 Navy pilots the same day after they ejected from a jet that crashed into the San Diego Bay. So the military is having some mishaps lately,
Yeah, I mean, things aren't going well, and this one, I mean, they one of the things a defense official told USN News, the Super Hornet was being loaded onto the aircraft elevator on Truman when the strike fighter slid over the edge. I don't know. I mean, I don't know. The Houthis in Yemen must be laughing at this, and it's really, I mean, it's obviously an accident, and it was a $66 million single seat jet. So I hope there's no one person responsible for it, but I'm sure he'll be doxed and named by the Trump administration. The Stryker group is there, sort of fighting the Houthis and protecting ships that are passing through those straits. Incredible.
I wonder how many people are going to be military court-martialed or in trouble for this one.
Yeah, that's what I was saying. Like, who are they going to finger point? Are they going to shout out names and stuff? Ordinarily you'd think no, but but things not going well. Let's we've got David Cay Johnston coming on the show shortly, but and this is sort of the kind of story that I want to talk about with him. But the going back to the tariffs, we were just talking about them with Canada and Amazon, right? Amazon was considering putting on a tariff charge, basically, so that when you bought something on Amazon, they would make it more expensive because of tariffs, and you'd have to sort of pay that tariff difference. Well, as you can imagine, the president wasn't happy about it, and President Trump called Jeff Bezos on Tuesday, this morning, after the company considered displaying the added cost of tariffs on certain items.
So it's going to be like here's the regular price, here's the tariff price, side by side comparison.
Right.
Yeah, okay.
Exactly. And the way that sometimes they'll say, if you subscribe and get this every month, it'll be this much, but if you just buy it once, it'll be this much. So Trump called Bezos to complain about reports that Amazon was considering displaying the cost of U.S. tariffs next to the prices for certain products on the company's website. Two senior White House officials told CNN. Trump later said it was a good call. Jeff Bezos was very nice. He was terrific. He solved the problem very quickly. Good guy. The billionaires are running the show, folks. They're running it at Doge. They're running it at Amazon. And the president can just call and say, that's not good business practice, which I'm sure he doesn't do with just anybody, but he loves his billionaires.
Speaking of Doge and billionaires, I saw this story yesterday about how much Elon Musk is benefiting from all of the cost cutting. How much, that there were multiple investigations into his practices, and he kind of went right after those agencies that were targeting him. And there's a report that says Musk and his companies could avoid $2 billion in potential liability because of his role with Doge. So on one hand, he loses money because of Tesla going down, and he's now the, Dr. Evil of America. But he has a tarnished public image, is what I mean to say. But on the other hand, he saves, according to this report, $2.37 billion in potential legal liability as a result of his role in Doge and in the federal government. Wow. I think you're muted. For some reason, I can't hear you, Michael Schur. Nope, I'm still muted. Hopefully you guys can hear me. There he is.
Yeah, can you?
Okay. Now I can hear you. Oh, nope, you're muted again. What happened? I don't know.
We're having
there you go. I hear you now.
You hear me? Okay.
Yeah.
I don't know what's going on. The predictive part of Musk getting involved with Trump and seeing the opportunity was to fight the regulators. That's exactly what brought him onto the political stage. So it's not a surprise. Not to mention, he so cleverly said Department of Government Efficiency. He sells the Doge coin. That's his cryptocurrency. Yeah. So for him, it's a double win, because every time the name Doge is said, it's basically a plug for his cryptocurrency. Yeah. So there's that too. This has been a money-making scheme, a brilliant one. I mean, it made him seem even more brilliant to me than was reported as a person, forgetting what you think of him. But as a businessman, this was brilliant. He played Donald Trump to the point where he said, I'll come in with all these billions, but it's going to make me so much more money because I'm not going to have to fight these regulators anymore, and I'm going to be able to proceed. And what's he doing? By getting rid of the regulators, by saying he's cutting costs in the government, and that makes the president happy. It's a remarkable scheme that he has going on.
It really is. It's shocking to hear how much money he saved in the long run, allegedly. I mean, I'm sure it might even be more than they realize. Who knows?
Yeah.
Because of not only was he being targeted by certain agencies, but also, and we only know because stories came out of the State Department about all of the Tesla Cybertrucks that they were on contract to buy, but how many SpaceX contracts, how many of Musk's companies benefited additionally from government contracts? I don't think we know that answer yet.
No, we have no
Mhm.
idea. We'll learn about them, but
Mhm.
it's and then by the time Musk is out of government, which is inevitable,
Yeah.
he will have gotten the job done that he needed to get done for himself, and then he could go back to rehabilitating his image in whatever way he wanted to. So it's an incredible thing. Kim, do you think we should do some news
Sure.
and then have David Cay Johnston join us at the top of the
Absolutely.
hour? All right,
Happy to
let's
do the
do it.
news.
All right,
Here it comes.
I bet it is.
There it is. On the Mark Thompson Show, I'm Kim McAllister, and this report is sponsored by CoachellaValleyCoffee.com. As Michael Schur mentioned, President Trump is marking his 100th day in office. He'll do it with a rally this evening in Michigan. The White House says Trump will highlight the administration's accomplishments on border security and efforts to strengthen the economy. He's also expected to talk about tariffs, which have been contributing to a slide in approval ratings in the polls. Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney's Liberal Party celebrating a victory in Canada's national elections. Carney's win follows an election heavily influenced by President Trump's tariffs and his comments about making Canada the 51st state. Clearly, Canada wants no part of that. Vice President J.D. Vance says the White House is going to have to battle extreme judges. While on the Clay and Buck show, Vance said President Trump warned him the courts are going to try and stop everything we do, from immigration to military policy. Vance claims the district courts are trying to govern the country. He said the administration is going to battle these judges to allow Trump to carry out what he was elected to do. House Republicans are working to create what President Trump calls the Big Beautiful Bill. It's a budget reconciliation measure that would implement much of his spending agenda. The bill would extend the 2017 tax cuts and keep Trump's promises to expand them as well. Amazon now denying this report that said it was going to display how much tariffs add to the total cost of items. This comes after this agency Punchbowl News reported the online retail giant would do so. A statement made today, Amazon said the ultra low cost part of its service that competes with Chinese sites like Temu had considered adding import charges to its cart, but decided against doing that.
Well, we know why they decided. We know why they came to
Yeah.
that decision. That makes it seem very benign.
Yeah,
Oh, then they
doesn't
decided,
it?
oh, maybe this
Yeah.
isn't a good idea, right?
Yeah, maybe not so much. The number of job openings fell to a 6-month low in March. The Labor Department says 7.2 million jobs were available last month. That's down by 901,000 for the year. Federal government saw the largest drop in job openings. The total separations increased in state and local government, excluding education. Governor Hochul and New York lawmakers have come to terms on a new budget deal. It is a $254 billion budget that includes a middle-class tax cut, and it triples the child tax credit for parents. The portion of the budget that may turn heads is Hochul's proposal to ban cell phones in public schools. The governor says the ban will protect kids from addictive technology designed to take their attention away from their classes and their schoolwork.
Yeah, the
Are
pushback to that's interesting. Parents who say, families that say, "Oh, well, I have to be able to reach my kid." I see that, but we all, before they invented the cell phone, we figured it out.
Yeah, my child does not have a cell phone. He's 11.
Yeah.
And if he wants to call me, he goes to the office and he says, "Can I call my mom?" And they say,
Right.
"Why?" And then he gives them a good or bad reason, and they either let him or they don't. Done.
Yeah,
Enough.
yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
2 Columbia University janitors are suing more than 40 protesters from last April's Hamilton Hall riot. Mario Torres and Lester Wilson say they were threatened, pummeled, and held hostage by pro-Palestinian demonstrators during a regular overnight shift. Their lawsuit reveals hand-drawn maps used to identify the locations of heavy equipment that could be used to block doors and windows at that historic building. The janitors claim demonstrators who blocked their efforts to leave Hamilton Hall were distributing bike locks, rope, zip ties, food, cots, and other supplies to carry out the raid. They say the experience triggered PTSD, which has now left them unable to return to work. There are thousands of Los Angeles County workers expected to go on strike next week. More than 55,000 county employees set to hit the picket lines over alleged labor law violations. Those going on strike include public works employees, public and mental health professionals, social workers, and the Parks and Rec staff. In Oakland, the police department is cutting the public off from its live radio feeds. Bay Area News Group reporting the Oakland police moving all of its scanner feeds to private encrypted channels, and that means the public will no longer be able to monitor public police scanners. That will be it. Californians believe they need nearly $1.5 million to retire comfortably. The figure, I would have thought it would have been more than that. The figure accounts for saving sources like 401ks and IRAs, but excludes real estate. According to a 2025 Northwestern Mutual survey for the San Francisco Chronicle, California's magical number for retirement is the same as last year. It's also $210,000 higher than the average American's expectation. And that, they say, indicates Californians are feeling the effects of inflation and the state's high cost of living. This report sponsored by CoachellaValleyCoffee.com. It is organic. It is fresh. It is sourced from women-owned farms, and it is delicious. CoachellaValleyCoffee.com is the website, and we have an exclusive gift for you. It's 10% off of whatever you order. Please go check out the website. They've got tasting notes that'll tell you exactly what you're ordering, so you make sure you get the roast that's right for you if you're ordering coffee, and the tasting notes on the tea, good as well. CoachellaValleyCoffee.com. You enter Mark T at checkout, no spaces, Mark T, and get your 10% off at CoachellaValleyCoffee.com. I'm Kim McAllister, and this is The Mark Thompson Show.
The Mark Thompson Show.
I don't know. For some reason, we're having mute problems with Michael's audio.
Is that working now?
There you go.
I have no idea why this is happening. It just keeps going on mute. In any case, I was saying that we're going to give David Cay Johnston 10 seconds to write down Mark T on his notepad so that when we're done with this next interview, he can go and order his Coachella Valley coffee and get 10% off. So now that he's had time to do that, it's always my favorite part of guest hosting here is to have a chat with old friend David Cay Johnston. David, thank you for coming in. There's so much to talk about.
Glad to be here, Michael.
All right.
And I do like their coffee.
All right. Well, see, look at that. A plug already. Yeah, right. And if David lifted a Mark Thompson Show mug when he just lifted his mug, I would have had a heart attack. Because, David, it's a thing on the show that I've been fighting. Yeah, Rochester, RIT right there. That's the one to have. I there's been a thing where Mark refuses to send me a mug no matter how many times I've asked him. I now believe it's just shtick at this point. So if you had raised one, I would have been irate. But
I certainly have one, Michael.
Yeah, see, then that's, the dagger just goes in a little deeper. Well, I'll get one too. I'm going to make one. I'm going to go to one of these places where you can make them and pick them up in a week. We spent a lot of the first hour talking about the Canadian election. You're in Rochester, it's pretty close to Canada. This ripple effect was incredible. I don't want to belabor Canada because we have so much Americans, news to cover. But it's really unprecedented what happened up there, isn't it to you?
Well, back in November, it was very clear that after 10 years of Justin Trudeau, Canadians were ready to change, and they were going to put the Conservatives in power, and Pierre Poilievre was going to become the next prime minister. Donald Trump undid that all by himself. Yeah. One of my 8 children is a Canadian citizen. She's a lawyer there. And so we pay a lot of attention to matters in Canada, which is about 90 miles from where I am. This is a clear repudiation of Donald Trump. It is a clear statement about Canadian sovereignty. Now, let's be clear, the Liberals did not win a majority, 174 seats. They only got 154. So this will be a coalition government in order to continue. And I don't know how long it will last, but the conservative candidate had tied his wagon to Donald Trump and tried very hard to undo that, and not that many voters were taken in. So I think this is an important development. I mean, all around the world, show me where Donald Trump is winning. He claims he's negotiating with China. The Chinese say, we're not talking to you. Where does this come from? I can't point to any place where his tariff threats and his threats to take over the Panama Canal, Greenland, etc., are producing any positives. But if the audience has it, put it in the chat. Let's take a look at it.
Yeah, that's really true. Well, one thing in the chat that I want to point out off subject is GJ Thomas says, I read your book, David, in one sitting, a really good read. So one sitting. That's
well, thank you. That must be the Making of Donald Trump, because it was a pretty short book. It's about 57,000 words.
Okay. All right. Well,
the others are all about 110, 120,000.
He did it in one sitting, which a lot of people can't do with any book. But yeah, so going back to what you were just talking about, bias aside, looking at the successes in these first 100 days, and sending you congratulations and whatever else you say to celebrate the 100 days of the Donald Trump administration. When you look at these 100 days, there is not accomplishment that you can point to, even if you're a conservative. What are you happy about?
I did 3 overseas television shows this morning, and I got asked that question, and I can't point to an example of where he's done something that's made America better. Never mind great, better. I can show you that he's taken the best economy in the world, what The Economist magazine called the envy of the world last fall, and turned it into a troubled economy. He's putting all of our lives at risk with everything from laying off people at the Federal Aviation Administration to radically cutting back on food safety inspections, and putting crazy Robert F. Kennedy Jr. In charge of our whole federal health apparatus. Measles now has the pro-measles party. That is the Donald Trumpers, the pro-measles party. They're doing very well. So I guess if you're pro-measles, things are going well.
Things couldn't be better. But yeah, but like you're saying, I mean, if I made myself for a moment the most MAGA crazed person in America, and I was asked, what are you happy about? I don't know that I'd have an answer even in that guise. I mean, I don't see what they could even be happy about.
Well, the Heritage Foundation and Hillsdale College, both sort of out in space organizations on the far right, are both holding celebrations. But based on the interview I watched while I was waiting to go on one of the overseas TV stations with one of the prominent Trump spokespeople, who, like the press secretary, was notable mostly for her blonde, gorgeous looks and perfect white teeth, what I heard were 3.5 minutes of just lies. The economy was terrible shape, and now it's the best economy in the world. Billions of dollars of new investment is coming here. China is begging us to please offer them relief. They're just living in a fantasy world. That's the way that they justify this. And I don't think you're going to see much change among Republicans until one of two or both of two key things happen. The Medicaid program, our federal health care program for poor people who are not 65 or older, and some people 65 and older qualify, but mostly it's for people younger than that, is being radically cut. You can be sure you're going to see TV reports sometime in the future where some mother says, my 8-year-old child, I'm just told, is going to die because they refuse care for her. They say that's too expensive, or it's this, or it's that. Or you're going to see the same sort of person saying, my widowed mother is the one who takes care of my children so I can hold my 3 jobs. And her cost of insulin just went from $25 a month to $1,000 a month. And her income is only $1,000 a month. And she's been not taking her full insulin, and she's sick. These things are going to happen. And when they do, that's when you're going to start to see some of the poorly educated Republicans change their tune and realize that Donald Trump is not their friend. He is, in fact, very much against their interests.
Yeah. It's easy for them to say that, oh, you know, getting rid of DEI initiatives is great. They love that. But when that doesn't hit them at home, that doesn't hit them in the kitchen, in the bedroom, that doesn't hit them in the hospital, when the things that do practically matter to them change, that's when you're going to start seeing that distancing. And many of them live in red districts, and they're going to be calling red members of Congress, and those members of Congress are going to have to answer for it. And if it's not politically practical, it's not going to work out for Trump.
Well, and given what they apparently have been doing with the Social Security Administration, here's another nightmare scenario. You don't get your Social Security check. Now, Michael Lutnick, the billionaire commerce secretary, said, well, when people complain they didn't get their Social Security checks, that's when you're going to know they're the fraudsters, because it's the fraudsters who will call up to complain. My mother, her check didn't come. She just expects, well, I made a mistake. I'll get one next month. Yeah, because your son is a billionaire.
Yeah, right. Or son-in-law. It was his mother-in-law, but still the same idea. Like when your son-in-law is Howard Lutnick and he's a billionaire, and she's not going to call and complain. Of course she's not. She probably doesn't open the envelope in the first place.
And so I expect what will happen is some people will not get their Social Security checks, and they'll go to complain. And what they'll hear in essence is, well, get in line. And, oh, by the way, we'll talk to you in 13 months because they're messing with these computer systems. They're also doing a couple of other very curious things. They got into the IRS systems, and they're apparently using the IRS systems to find people who are here subject to deportation. Well, I'm sorry. If these people are criminals who aren't paying taxes, why do you have IRS records on them?
That's right. That's great.
And at the same time, they're dismissing large numbers of the most sophisticated auditors at the IRS, who typically bring in $20 million for their annual work. Now, if you're in business and you have salespeople, and that's what you could argue the IRS auditors are, they bring in money. If you can hire people for an all-in cost, their salary of say $150,000 and their benefits and whatnot, maybe $220 total, who bring you in $20 million, the logical thing to do is go hire thousands more of those people until they're down to bringing in, say, $1 million for their $220,000 cost. No, they're dismissing these people. And this makes no sense. And then finally, we now have a version of the Trump tax bill, once again, overwhelmingly goes to the centimillionaire class, people with at least $100 million of net worth. And yet they're complaining about the debt growing too fast. Well, I'm sorry, if you think the debt's growing too fast, why in the world would you continue the existing Trump tax cuts for the rich, and why would you increase them? Makes no sense. And of course, what's going to get cast aside are Donald's promises that he's going to make Social Security income tax free, which, by the way, I'm in favor of. I think Democrats made a terrible decision when they agreed to tax Social Security benefits and other promises that Trump made, because this is not about ordinary people. This is about Donald becoming our absolute dictator. He's threatening, or maybe it was last night, he's threatening prosecution of pollsters because he doesn't like what they're finding. And that's all this is about. It's absolute power.
Yeah, he's tried to muscle Rupert Murdoch into changing their pollster because they're coming up with numbers at Fox that he doesn't like. I mean, if you don't like the election is rigged and now the polls are rigged, and the polls have no obvious meaning other than what we glean from them, but the fact that he is able or willing or inclined, I guess is the better way of saying it, to do these sort of things at the drop of a hat says all you need to know about. And that is something that dictators do. Ryan, thank you for donating to the show, has a question for David or a statement, but he says about the things you and I are just talking about. I've heard all these predictions of Trump's demise in his first term. I'll believe it when I see it, David. I think it's a fair question in that, even what I was just saying, well, these people are going to run into problems with, like your example of an 8-year-old son who's ill, and then they're going to have their Republican congressperson, they call their congressperson and say, my 8-year-old son's ill. And that man or woman is going to say, well, I can't support this bill because it's hurting my constituents. But that doesn't really happen, or it hasn't happened yet. Can you speak to what Ryan is saying?
Well, absolutely. First of all, I've never went around saying they'll be demised by Donald. I said in 2011 when he was running and dropped out once he got a new contract for his TV show, as I predicted. I've said all the way along that if Donald gets to the White House, he's never going to leave. And in all my coverage of Donald, going back close to 40 years now, the only mistake that I have any record of him ever acknowledging was when he said recently, I shouldn't have left the White House in 2021. And assuming he's healthy and alive, he's not leaving in 2029 peacefully. He's not going to say, wave goodbye and go off. If you think that, you just wouldn't pay attention 4 years ago. How much power Donald will be able to wield is going to be up to two sets of people. One is the courts, and Donald's taunting of the courts and suggesting I don't have to pay attention to the courts is not going to go well. The second is what happens in the elections a year and a half from now. Now, that's a long time, a year and a half from now.
Yeah.
But if the Republicans continue to hold on to Congress, hey, kiss your democracy goodbye, because they're not going to do anything to stand up to him. If the Democrats get control of the House, they can stymie Trump, but that's all they can do. If they can get control of the House and the Senate, now they can do a lot of things to rein in Trump. And let's remember, this isn't just about Donald. Donald has now changed the contours of what can happen. So J.D. Vance, Tom Cotton, and a host of others standing in line want to be president in the future. They want to be dictator in the future.
Josh Hawley among them too.
Yes, and absolutely, Josh Hawley. And we need to restore the faith and belief in democracy and the liberties of the people. The Republicans used to call themselves the party of freedom. And now look at what they're doing. They're the anti-freedom party. They're the pro-dictatorship party.
They're not just the anti-freedom party, pro-dictatorship. They were the anti-Russian party forever and ever and ever. And look where they find themselves on that issue as well.
If I have to tell you, if when I was in junior high school and high school in Santa Cruz in the 60s, if a teacher had said, in the future, the day will come when a Republican president will say that he trusts the leader in the Kremlin and doesn't trust American intelligence agencies and aligns himself with the Kremlin against one of their countries they want to vanquish, I would have gone straight to the principal's office and said, hey, Mr. Jones or Miss Smith, is crazy. And yet here we are.
It's bizarre, and people are talking about using the word oligarchy, but that's where we can't just drop that word from the lexicon when that's what we're fighting in many ways, and that's what has seduced Donald Trump into his support of Putin in many ways as well. Let's talk a little bit about things that are happening here, newsworthy, and I want to talk about the civil rights lawyers that are leaving. In huge swaths of them are leaving the Justice Department because the Justice Department has decided that they want to interpret what civil rights are, not what these employees and lawyers at the Justice Department have been doing. Tell me about the grave effects of this.
Well, what's going on here is that it's we poor oppressed white people, especially white men. We're the ones who are the victims here. And the Justice Department Civil Rights Office, which all the way back to Eisenhower has sought to enforce civil rights laws, is just being completely dismantled. And the attorneys there are walking away. At the same time, on the criminal side, the Justice Department is now pursuing people for personal reasons of Donald Trump, illegitimate reasons, and lots of people who are criminals are being let go. Donald, through pardons and commutations, has proven to be a great friend to big drug dealers, for example. It's gotten very, very little attention. Can you imagine if Joe Biden had given a pardon to one of the biggest drug dealers in the world, as Trump did recently, the kind of coverage there would be. And the object of this is to turn the Justice Department into a tool to go after anyone who tries to stand up to Donald Trump. And the people 100% responsible for allowing this to happen are the Republicans who control the Senate. They're the ones who confirmed Pam Bondi, an utterly corrupt individual who has total loyalty to Donald Trump and utter disregard for her oath of office, just as Donald does. And we have a system of advice and consent. For many years in the early days of the Republic, they didn't even hold hearings on candidates. It was just assumed whoever was appointed was a honorable person. But we now have dishonorable people all throughout the government, the FBI and other places. And the responsibility for that, beyond Donald Trump's choosing them as appointees, is 100% Senate Republicans. They control the advice and consent system.
And they gave us Pete Hegseth too. I mean,
Sure.
if you look at, I think you're always, if you're in the opposite party, if you support the opposite platform, and you have a president in office who's not the one you voted for, you're always going to get cabinet members who you don't like, who you have ideological problems with. But ordinarily, you rely on the fact that they're at least up to the job. And
yeah. Michael, absolutely. As long as they're competent,
right.
Then it's a question of policy. And sorry, your side lost.
Right.
That's the way the rule goes. But here you have people who are manifestly incompetent, who are a serious, in the case of Pete Hegseth, a serious threat to our national security. Now, last week when Kim was handling the hosting duties, I said that I hadn't written about this because Timothy Snyder beat it to me the morning I was sitting down to write it. There is going to be some kind of terrorist attack on this country. And I'm not talking about any false flag nonsense. I mean, we have enormous vulnerabilities now. And the Iranians, the Russians, somebody out there is going to realize that they have an opportunity to make trouble for us, the way Osama bin Laden did with his absolutely spectacular publicity stunt. There was no military significance to 9/11, but it certainly shook up the country in ways that he wanted and exposed all sorts of divisions. And somebody is going to exploit what Trump has done. We've backed down on our cybersecurity. We've dismissed some of the most talented and important people in national security because the bigot Laura Loomer doesn't like them. And we are vulnerable. And when it happens, you watch, Donald will use this as an excuse to try to further extend his power.
Yeah, and it's hard not to see how he's going to be able to do that because it's being facilitated by all of the people that have been put in place by him. I want, there's another story I want to get to before we part ways, but I want to stay on this story about the Civil Rights Division. It was founded, like you said, the Civil Rights Division was founded really to protect Black Americans in the mid 50s, and then it evolved into protecting people with different biases based on race, on gender, on other things over time. And now this administration is trying to dismantle it entirely and make it about protecting the police, in essence, right?
Right.
And I'm not being glib. That's exactly what's in what they're talking about. And so this is a very dangerous thing. They're getting rid of everybody who was in favor of DEI. This is at the Civil Rights Division. Let's get rid of everyone who's in favor of DEI, and we need to stop persecuting the police. They're the ones we're protecting.
I think it goes. The police are at the core of this, but it goes way beyond that. I mean, Donald Trump is a misogynist, white supremacist. He's a racist. He's been that way his whole life. He's literally had judicial proceedings where he's been found to have engaged in pretty crude and awful discrimination. He's been only fined for it as regulatory matter in the past, not in any other way punished for it. And Donald is doing what he in his own mind sees, which is so long as there are Black, brown, Hindu, etc., people in the United States, they're a threat. That's his view of the world. And he is four square for white males doing whatever they damn well please. And they're going to remove everything in the way. Look at what they're trying to do with the African American History Museum, where they're proposing to close and remove various facts. The removal of photographs of, say, Jackie Robinson, who was a U.S. Army captain in World War II, from the internet, and black women pilots who flew newly made bombers and cargo planes from the U.S. to Europe so they could be used in the war there. They've been removed. And all of this is to rewrite our history. It's very incredibly Orwellian. You whitewash and redo the history and produce the effect that you want. And where are the Democrats about these issues? I mean, I watch Hakeem Jeffries get up there, and I'm sorry, it comes across to me the same way Hillary Clinton and Chuck Schumer often do, which is blah, 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 and oh, blah, 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 and you should be blah, 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 blah. By the way, did you notice footnote 15 on page 47 of our new report? Wake up, folks. Governor Pritzker, of the multi-billion-dollar Pritzker family in Illinois, Hyatt Hotels and other properties, he's doing much more aggressive, and he is not AOC. He's not way over on the left. He is a moderate, middle-of-the-road person, but he does have principles and scruples. It's certainly way beyond anything the Republicans have shown. And the Democrats, they seem like deer in the headlights. They don't know what to do. They're frozen.
I agree with that to an extent. And I think that different Democrats have different roles, but I know what you're saying. And it's frustrating for so many people that we listen to and talk with because of the fact that they want to see something get done. I think Schumer and Jeffries, and I'm not being apologists of theirs, but I think that they realize how they are stymied in their daily work, and they're resigned to doing it the way they do it. Whereas the Pritzkers, the Slotkins, the Bernie Sanders, the Representative Ocasio-Cortezes, those people, even Chris Murphy, even Brian Schatz, people are speaking out from the Senate. Cory Booker, people said, oh, what does it matter, a 26-hour filibuster? What matters is if you don't have the votes and the ability to do things, you can get people inspired to organize and to demonstrate and to push back, which is what Pritzker called for in New Hampshire the other day. So while I definitely get the frustration, and I certainly personally would like to see a change in leadership, at least in the Senate, I understand that that different people take on different roles in these curious times.
Sure. But what the Democrats don't seem to have is a coordinated theory of what they should be doing and how to respond to Trump. And I understand that Donald is somebody who is completely outside the mainstream of politics. And we see that in how the Washington Press Corps, which I made it my whole life, I made sure I was not part of the Washington Press Corps. I'd go visit there, but I wouldn't live there. Turned down going to the Washington Bureau, both the LA Times and the New York Times. They don't understand how to deal with Donald. And the problem is the assumption that Donald is a politician with a different view. No, he is a career criminal, the third generation head of a 4-generation white-collar crime family. They steal with contracts and lies and bullying. They don't do it with violence. And he's appallingly ignorant. And he does so many things that if they had been done by any previous president, including, say, George W. Bush, all hell would have broken loose.
Of course.
Donald goes to sleep at the Pope's funeral. And what are the stories about? He wore a blue suit when the protocol is you wear a black suit. There's something fundamentally wrong here in not understanding how to cover what Trump is doing and how. And as Steve Bannon has pointed out, by doing so many things at once, you can't cover all of them. You can't be aware of all of them. Nobody can do that. It's just too many things. So the Democrats need to come up with a real strategy. How are we going to persuade the American people you'd be better off with us? Right. And they need to learn marketing. And this is not a new rant for me or for many other people. The Democrats just don't know how to market.
They do. They've had. I mean, you're right. It's one of they don't know how to do that. It's about messaging. The Republicans are great at messaging. They're great at the turn of phrase. They're great at the quick one-liner, and they have somebody who is now, has such a cult-like following that whatever he says is echoed across a chamber that is incredible, right? I mean, I always say this, like, if the other part of it is that Democrats don't like and haven't historically liked being told what message they need to spread. Rush, I always say this, Rush Limbaugh's listeners were called ditto heads and they took it as a compliment. If you called a Democrat a ditto head, they would say, whoa, what am I doing wrong here? Wait a second. Right. Really? I'm not doing that. Right. And that's a built-in difficulty, a built-in obstacle.
Right. And there's two core issues here that underlie this. My economics trilogy, Perfectly Legal, Free Lunch, and The Fine Print, along with years and decades of my reporting on inequality, which I was out doing when nobody else was on a consistent basis, has been focused on how the changes in this country that reduced unions hurt 80% of all workers. At the peak, only 37% of private sector workers were in unions, but that was enough that 80% of workers benefited. And wages have come down severely in this country. When I lived when I was in the San Francisco Bureau of the LA Times in the mid 70s, I lived in Santa Cruz where I grew up. I had neighbors who were captains of 747s and DC-10s. And in today's money, they were making well over $1 million a year when you adjust for inflation. They're making about $200,000 a year, which is well over $1 million now, 50 years later. The highest paid pilot at Delta 2 years ago was a first officer who worked every flight he could, and he made less than $500,000. When I was a teenager, and the San Jose Mercury hired me as a staff writer, in today's money, my base pay was $65,000 plus medical care at no cost. There was a pension plan. I just wasn't old enough to participate in it. You had to be 21. Paid vacation, right? All of those benefits. I talk to young journalists all the time who tell me they've been offered jobs at $30,000 a year. The reason wages came down was so we could redistribute $50 trillion upward to the top 10th of 1%, top half of 1%. This attack, by the way, in the 1%, I think is mistaken because half of the 1% are two-income couples who are both professionals. So a surgeon married to a successful lawyer, an accounting firm partner to someone who owns a business. That's half of the 1%. And when you look at the data, the bottom half of the 1%, their income is almost all labor. They own almost no stocks or bonds except in their retirement plans. So we need to really focus on the 10th of 1% and up crowd. That's where the redistribution has gone. If we'd had $50 trillion more distributed among the bottom 90% for over the last 50 years, my goodness, we'd be flush. People wouldn't be desperate. They'd be in much better shape. And so you combine that with America's long history of racism and making sure if you're white, you've got to make yourself sound superior, even if you're decidedly the opposite. And you get Donald Trump. And it's not just Donald anymore. I mean, if Donald goes away and J.D. Vance were to go away, that's not the end of this. This is now a permanent new condition that we need to address.
There's no question about that. And I do think when Donald goes away, that many of the people that became involved because he showed up in the first place will go away, but a lot of them are going to stick around too. And I do think, the analogy I always use is it's like when Tiger Woods is golfing, the world watches when he's in a golf tournament and the ratings plummet when he's not in a golf tournament. I mean, there are people that came to the sport because of him. That said, there are a lot of people that didn't stick around, don't stick around when he's not playing. And I think that'll happen with Trump a bit.
Before we go, Michael, if I can just crow about one little thing.
Please.
At least 14 years ago in 2011, I said what I'm about to say. I think I said it before then, but the oldest I can find in my files is 2011 when Donald, after he was humiliated by Obama at the White House Correspondents' Dinner, was out there. I said, if Donald believes in his own mind, sincerely, truly believes that he is the only person qualified to be president of the United States, that everyone else is an idiot and an incompetent, and that he really should run the whole world if he could. And I've been knocked for that in a number of places. I've gone into shows where people go, that's just so indicative of your crazy thoughts. You're deranged. Well, Donald, whether he butt dialed or intentionally did so, he called a reporter at the Atlantic magazine, which he hates with a passion, and ended up giving an interview in which he said, I run the country and the whole world. In other words, he confirmed what I've been saying for 14 years, that Donald believes he should dictate to the whole world.
Yeah.
And
he talked about a third term in that article. He talked about a third term as well. He said it would be shattering if he had. And I wanted to talk about with you. And then I looked at the clock and I said, oh my God, we're still not.
If you want to do it, we got a couple of minutes.
Yeah, let's do that, because it's really important what he did. I mean, saying that I run the country and the whole world. By the way, he runs the whole world except for Canada. I think we learned last night.
Yes, well, we've seen that China very much takes its orders from Donald Trump. Not
at all. These are the words of dictators. And I remember being out in the country last year, interviewing people waiting in line to go into Trump events and saying, Donald Trump wants to be a dictator. I mean, these videos are on YouTube all over the place. Would you rather have Joe Biden as president or Donald Trump as a dictator? To a person, they all said Donald Trump as a dictator. They don't mind being dictated to in this way. And now he's saying, I run the world, the country and the world. This is outrageous stuff. And I don't know why they keep having mix-up between signal and telephone calls to the Atlantic, which is, they should learn that lesson too.
Well, so why wasn't the banner headline in the LA Times, the New York Times, the Washington Post this morning, Trump declares himself dictator? I mean, he did this in February 26th, as I pointed out in earlier shows, when he said he who saves his country violates no law. He reaffirmed that when the White House posted 3 times a picture of him wearing a regal crown with the line, long live the king. He hasn't made any bones about what he's doing here. He just hasn't said dictator. And well, there's a lot of great reporting out of Washington. There's also a lot of garbage reporting. You know, the great Cy Hirsch once told me, he said, you pick up the front page of the New York Times and you can read the greatest journalism human beings have ever produced. Move over one column, pure crap.
Right.
And
his book Reporter was fantastic.
Yeah, you get great stuff next to garbage stuff, but the Washington press corps just simply doesn't understand who Donald is in terms of how to cover him. And I think they all know what he wants to be and do. They can't figure out within the conventions of journalism how to cover him.
But David, let me ask you this, because I was in Washington covering the beginning of his first term, and there was some great reporting, amazing reporting coming out of the Washington Post, particularly, and I remember thinking that there was going to be, and I was wrong, but there was going to be a cumulative effect to this honest, good reporting, and what he did to the point where reporting doesn't matter, perhaps, is that he put in fake news and everything. He was able to immediately dismiss anything that came out that he didn't like.
Right. And that's one of Donald's, Donald is the greatest con man in the history of the world. And this is a good example. He understands what he needs to do to achieve what he wants. And so there's no question that huge numbers of people, if anything is contradictory to what Donald says, it has to be a lie. Right. That if it appeared in the New York Times or the Atlantic or the San Francisco Chronicle, it has to be a lie. And these are people, of course, who don't read or pay attention to the news in that way.
Right.
And the only thing that will change that is when Donald's policies hurt these people in a very visceral way. And a lot of them are going to have to be badly hurt. And I feel terrible about that. I don't take any joy in saying what I just said whatsoever. I'm just a realist about this after almost 60 years of doing this.
Yeah.
The people who have been conned, it's very hard to admit you were taken. There are people who committed suicide, who've gone to prison, and some of them people I exposed, and died in prison because they couldn't bring themselves to realize and admit they'd been conned. They may have realized it, but they couldn't admit it.
Right.
And Donald is brilliant about that. He's now compromised so many people, and they will look so foolish if they come around. But I think over time, enough of them will that we can get change. But we can only get change if the Democrats have a real strategy and plan to reach out and say things will be better under us, and we'll show you how. And the most crucial element to that is you got to have a plan to raise the wages of Americans. And that, as Pope Francis taught right when he became Pope, is unions. The Pope wrote, there is no economic justice without unions.
Yeah, it's I mean, you couldn't have said it better because but it can't be said better. That's exactly the point, is that the people have to be lifted up in some way, and the Democrats have to get that message across. In order to do that, they actually have to get that message across. They have the message, they have to figure out how to get it out there, and they haven't been very good at it, as we touched on earlier. And they're up against somebody who, in that same Atlantic interview, said that, when talking about due process and people being deported without due process, well, there are going to be some mistakes here and there.
And Donald actually said we can't have a trial for everybody. Well, I'm sorry.
Right, yeah.
Yes, you have to have a trial for everybody. That's
exactly
the system.
That's the system. That's the Constitution. But he's also saying I can run for a third term. He's also saying that we have to put in English as an official language. That there are so many things that that the birthright citizenship isn't constitutional when it is. So these are all the hallmarks of dictators, and we're seeing it. And then discrediting the press is where it all starts as well.
Yeah.
So.
Tony's question that was up in the Chiron just a minute ago.
Yeah.
The thing to pay attention to about Ukraine is that Donald Trump wants peace on Putin's terms. He continues to mouth the ridiculous argument that Ukraine started the war, and his idea that you have to give us mineral rights in order to get our protection. It tells you that Donald Trump is a criminal. That's what criminals do. Hey, you don't want your windows broken in front of your nice department store with all those figures, mannequins in the window? Well, you better pay us some protection. That's what this is about. And in all the things Donald is doing, that's how it works. And, every day I get emails from the Trump people saying, Donald has a gift for you. You can get this or that item, and then you go to it, as I always do, to check. And sure enough, it says send $25 or $50, and then you can get your gift. That's not a gift. Donald has no idea what a gift is. He's not disclosing his finances as the law requires. And, mark my words, there's a very high chance that when he finally has to pay in the two big civil fraud cases, the state of New York case and the E. Jean Carroll case, that while the check will be written to the victims by an insurance company, the repayment of that debt will really probably come from Elon Musk. Elon Musk, somewhere in the background, is the guarantor of at least some of that money.
Yeah, or he just keeps selling these coins and he can pay it off himself. But I agree with what you're saying. But
spend his
again,
own money, Donald.
Yeah.
Well, spend your own money.
But again, I mean, that then it's a whole new conversation about emoluments and nobody making more money off their presidency. This has never been seen before. It just keeps going and going, and we could sit here for more than all day and talk about it. And I could sit with you, David Cay Johnston, all day and talk about just about.
Well, I got to go to the gym with my trainer and work out.
All right, go do that. That's after nearly 6 decades in this business. David Cay Johnston, thanks so much for coming on the show. Yeah, you never get to everything that you want to talk about with David Cay Johnston, but it's such a pleasure to have that conversation always, Kim. It's and we thank Tony, who they read what Tony, the question on Ukraine, and for donating. We also thank Citizen Swain. Why is anyone aiming to get Mark Burnett to release the outtakes of The Apprentice so the world can finally see what a buffoon Don the Con is? The outtakes of The Apprentice allegedly have Donald Trump saying very racist things, and why they're not released, it's really, I think, the domain of Mark Burnett, and I don't know that he's compelled, that there's a way to compel him to release them, but you would think that if you knew that about someone who says that they run the country and the world, and you know that this is part of their makeup, what does it say about you, Mark Burnett, that you're not releasing it? So thank you again for supporting the show and for asking that question. I also, there are a few others that I want to, Pritzker gave quite a speech. Tammy says we're going to talk about that, play some of that. Inlay says Heritage Foundation is a faction that fears Trump ruining implementation of Project 2025 because it's so designed to move a bit slower. Is he can't even implement Project 25 because he only cares about himself. I think that there's first of all, we know he only cares about himself, but I think that he sees himself entwined in Project 2025, and it is a vehicle for aggrandizing Donald Trump. I don't know their schedule of implementation, but we're seeing it. And already, Russell Votes in the administration, and he wrote Project 2025. So we know that the fingerprints of Project 2025 are on this administration already.
So I asked Tony to look up the speech that Pritzker gave, and I think he has some of the footage where he calls for Americans to protest every day, to not let up. And he's pretty powerful in his speech. So I thought maybe if you're game, we could listen to a little bit of it.
Always game for JB Pritzker.
For mobilization. Never before in my life have I called for mass protests, for mobilization, for disruption. But I am now. These Republicans cannot know a moment of peace. They have to understand that we will fight their cruelty with every megaphone and microphone that we have. We must castigate them on the soapbox and then punish them at the ballot box. They must feel in their bones that when we survive this shameful episode of American history with our democracy intact, because we have no alternative but to do just that, that we will relegate their portraits to the museum halls reserved for tyrants and traitors.
Wow. I mean, yes, all of
that,
please.
Strong words. Yeah. Julian Bond used to say, don't agonize, organize. And he's saying, organize here, organize your protests. Of course, Stephen Miller in the administration said that he at the White House that his comments, if nothing else, could be construed as inciting violence, which just shows you the mindset of where Republicans are. That if you're saying we want to be disruptive and we want to get on soapboxes, that means we want violence, because to them, that's what they look at, right? To them, January 6th, Trump was on a soapbox and it incited violence. That's what pushing back means to them. It doesn't mean that here. That's not what Pritzker is saying. It's not what he's calling for. Pritzker, to his point, said about Miller, he wasn't listening to my speech at all then. I was calling for people to take out their megaphones and their microphones, to stand up on soapboxes and to get to the ballot box in order to defeat the people who are trying to take so many things away from the American people. That has nothing to do with inciting violence. But obviously, he's going to get criticized by the right for this, but I just found it so telling that to talk about protest and to talk about pushing back to these Trumpists means violence. That's where Miller's head goes. I just found it so telling. It's incredible.
I was struck by what Pritzker said at the end there about after we survive all of this, that their portraits should be hung in a hall where we point out tyrants, right? And I often wonder if there's any thought, and I know I'm trying to ascribe morals to people who left them in the toilet long ago, but do they ever wonder how history will remember them? Do they ever wonder, generations from now, how their members of their family, their descendants will look at them and think, God, I'm really embarrassed that my family was the bad guy in this situation, didn't stand up for America, didn't stand up for democracy, tried to, trash the Constitution. Do they ever think about how they'll be remembered?
If the civil rights movement is a lesson to that, there's so many, or so often there were times when you would see people who protested integration in the South say, "My God, I can't believe my parents were part of this. So
Yep.
my God, I can't believe I was." You heard people say that I can't believe that I took part in this, and what a young fool I was at that time. So there is some comeuppance. I don't think, Trump cares about what people think about him when he's alive, and I'm sure his presidential library and museum will say all we need to know about what he wants people to think about him when he's gone. But I think that this is more about rocking the boat and doing things that are going to enrich him, as David Cay Johnston was saying, but are also going to bother the other side. And they love bothering the other side. That everything's an incitation to violence, even rhetorically. And so I think that this is about legacy, but I don't think there's shame, that they see the shame in this now, and I'm not sure that people will see it later. The division is so clearly defined right now.
It seems like what I hear behind your words, if not out in front, is it's about money, not about being liked or being respected. That years from now, their family will have all the money, and so that makes all the difference.
I think so. I mean, I think, but I also mean that he does care. This president, look, I mean, he says the blacks love me, the Hispanics love me. That
Yeah.
He wants the love is important currency to him. It really is. So the adoration, leading a cult is important. Cult leaders do it for the money, but they also do it for the adoration. They scam people, they grift, there's all kinds of nefarious things that come in cults that we've learned. But they also want the adoration. Commentator says, Kim, if they think about it all, they probably count on the rewriting of history in their favor. Yeah, that's a good point. That's probably how they perceive it. But history tends to rewrite in the favor of what is right. I mean, I wish contemporary journalism and media would do that more than they do, but the historians are better about putting people in their place. I don't think that people look back at Bull Connor and the civil rights movement and they say he did really good things for Birmingham, right? And so by releasing hoses and dogs and all of that. So I think that there is that historians do a better job of that, and people rely on historians rather than somebody who was in the Trump administration to tell that history.
Did you hear did you see the story yesterday that there are major cuts to the Peace Corps? You would think of all the successful programs, of all the well thought of, well-intentioned, things that rise to the top that are hard to get into and really things that make a difference in the world, to cut at the Peace Corps?
Yeah, when I read it, I thought, this is where I instinctually go now, and it's probably not right of me, and it's certainly not objective of me. But my thought was, where does so much of the Peace Corps' work get done? It gets done in Latin America, and my first instinct, although with no way of corroborating it, my first instinct was to think, oh, we don't want to facilitate the ascent of Latin Americans, because then they're just going to want to come into the country. I mean, that was, and I don't know that I'm right about that, but it's so sad that was the first thing I thought. But yeah, cutting the Peace Corps is cutting something. Who put in the Peace Corps? I mean, you think that RFK Jr. would at least be able to go into the other room and say, hey, let's not touch Peace Corps, right?
No, I guess not. They don't care.
Yeah.
I was going to bring up Harvard as well, because we know that Trump is trying to take money away from them. And yesterday I saw that now they're opening a race investigation into Harvard, the Harvard Law Review. It's a Title VI investigation into both Harvard and the Harvard Law Review based on race-based discrimination into operations at Harvard. They say Harvard Law Review's article selection process appears to pick winners and losers on the basis of race, employing a spoil system in which the race of the legal scholar is as, if not more important than, the merit of the submission. That according to the Department of Education Acting Assistant Secretary for Civil Rights, Craig Traynor. So targeting Harvard in another way.
Well, targeting Harvard because Harvard didn't play by the rules we were putting in place. They're defying us, so we're going to keep going after them. And, it's one thing when you're Harvard and you have what I imagine and guess is $1 billion endowment that probably grew in the face of the defying the administration. But if you're not Harvard and you're some other smaller institution, smaller law firm, and you're not, a Weil Gotshal or one of the bigger ones that have been, called on, then you have bigger problems. But Harvard is, a lot of people in academia are counting on Harvard to fight this fight right now.
Mm-hmm. Last thing I wanted to throw at you is this, and it's interesting because this is, I think, the thumbnail of the show, is that Karl Rove appeared on Fox News. I'll call it Fox. I'll take the news off. Appears on Fox, and he has some pretty harsh words for Trump. He says that Trump is in very bad shape when it comes to the economy, not only in the short term, but also in the long term. And he says Americans are mad about what Trump is doing to safeguard American tax dollars. And so he kind of goes after him. How bad does it have to be when Karl Rove, who should be a big supporter, kind of comes out against you? And I know there's video, so Tony's working on that, but what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, my thoughts are it's a desperate bid at relevance for Karl Rove to come out, because if he wouldn't get on TV and an article written if he said good things about the economy to a degree. I mean, I don't really, Karl Rove was a recount away from being a disaster, in a Florida recount away from being a disaster, and then he was turned into this guru on everything. So I mean, I hate to be cynical about it, but I think when people who you once thought would be, were people drinking the Flavor Aid and hanging out and doing whatever was being told for them to say, would say exactly what, mirror exactly what was being said, that's who they were. And then when they came around and changed their stripes a little bit, that was great. There's some people that I take it more seriously from than I do Karl Rove, but it's still also he will be marginalized because he's part of the Bush side of the Republican Party, and the Republican Party is so post-Bush right now. The one that we're looking at now is so post-Bush. I mean, what they kicked Jeb Bush while he was down, criticized George H.W. Bush, criticized George W. Bush, who didn't even endorse Kamala Harris. So I think that there is didn't endorse Trump either, I should say, but didn't endorse Harris. So I think it's newsworthy. I think it's always good because it facilitates other people. And I always think that's important. It's why when all these former Republicans during the race were endorsing Harris, I didn't think that was going to make Harris the winner, but I thought it would make it a little easy for Republicans to vote against Trump. And so that's why I think this has that effect.
Yeah, I don't know if he has video, but no, he doesn't. He's telling me. Okay, so let's move to this story because I thought this was interesting as well. Trump gave this interview where he says Pete Hegseth, who we know has seen scandal after scandal since he assumed control of the Pentagon. Trump says, hey, it's okay. Hegseth is going to get it together.
That was in the Atlantic. Yeah, that was in the Atlantic article that we were just talking about with David Cay Johnston. That was part of it. He was saying he'll get it together. Like I mean, you don't. It's not like a first baseman who was just called up from the minors who can't hit in the majors yet, and the manager says, "Oh, he's hit at every level. He'll figure it out. He'll be able to hit the ball soon." This is somebody who's the Secretary of Defense of the United States of America, the biggest military power in the world. And we're not we're talking about him getting it together. The guy is screwing up left and right, was underqualified. But I guess if you're the president who appointed him, you want to give him he said he talked to Hegseth. I had a talk with him. I'm not going to tell you what I said. We had a good talk.
Wow.
Okay.
I wonder what that conversation was like. But there's a field Pentagon official who said after the signal scandal, Hegseth was focusing on these weird details, which leads me to believe that people close to him are looking at him askance like, is this someone who really can get it together? Because this guy's not focusing on the right things or prioritizing the right things here. And so I wonder if he's somebody who's not able to really do the job or get it together.
Yeah, I mean, when the civilian leadership of the Pentagon loses the generals and they lose, we've talked about this before, Kim, when they lose the decorated officers, they're not going to be able to stay in that job. And that's where I think it will erode for him, is when military leaders go to the Joint Chiefs and the Joint Chiefs go to the National Security Advisor, and the National Security Advisor goes to the president. I mean, that's how it works, especially in the military, where you go rank to rank to rank. And I think at a certain point, they're going to say Hegseth isn't the right guy for this. And there'll be something that causes that pivot, but it hasn't happened with the signal thing, but I imagine it'll happen at some point.
The last story I found that I wanted to bring up to you is this report that Mexico has agreed to release water to the United States. But the story about how they're releasing water from our shared rivers also indicates that really the only reason they're doing this is because of threats from Trump over tariffs. It's interesting. President Claudia Sheinbaum Pardo of Mexico responded to Trump blaming the water deficit on a 3-year drought. She said there's a strong desire to continue fulfilling our commitments, and that Mexico has agreed with the United States to implement measures aimed at mitigating a potential shortfall. And so she's going to release the water here. But realistically, they were bullied into it.
Yeah, of course they were bullied into it. I mean, and that's what the bullying doesn't. That's not going to go away. The bullying. It's part of the way that this country is engaging now. It leads to bullying in both ways, by the way, but it leads to bullying, and bullying is a wartime tactic. It's not a peacetime tactic.
It's interesting when you talk about, looking at America now being the bully of the world, how Canada just responded to Trump's efforts to bully them. I wonder if what now or formerly were our allies will stand up and say no to bullying. And where does that put America on the world stage? I was reading an article about how dangerous it is to mess with the world order. How history has shown that it doesn't go well for the people that do that. And so what kind of position does that put us in?
Yeah, look, I think when, first of all, the First Lady is going to take care of all of it, because I don't know if that's still her pet project, but she was the anti-bullying czar.
Yeah.
How the anti-bullying czar of America could be married to Donald Trump is one of the great mysteries of American history. But I do think that, and I think we heard this in the Andrew Cohen interview, is that they're hosting the G7 in Canada. That Mark Carney is going to hold a lot of sway with the other disenchanted leaders, people disenchanted with Donald Trump, so that there will be a group of adults that say, we're not going to be bullied. We're not going to do this. We're going to stick with Ukraine. We are going to find other trade deals that are favorable for us. So I think if you see, Carney and Macron and Starmer, and you're going to start seeing groups of leaders around the world that say there's another way. We can work around this guy.
I think you've done it again, Michael Schur.
We brought it home?
Yeah, you brought it home. This is another great Mark Thompson show. Look at you go.
All right. Well, thank you. Thank you, Kim. Thank you, Tony. Thank you to Andrew Cohen, to David Cay Johnston. I'll be back tomorrow. Mark is back Thursday, but let's keep the ratings up tomorrow. So, he comes back and says, hey, what happened here? Get me a mug. Thank you all. Have a great Tuesday. Happy 100th day week. Talk to you later.
No, that's not happy. No.
Never
Thank you,
mind.
Michael Schur.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.